Greetings everyone, Melderon here, and welcome to another DevCamp Melderon TV video. Today we're going to be talking about BWL, my predictions, my thoughts, and what I think guilds and players should know going into a raid like this. So BWL, in my opinion, is a step up from MC, and that sounds pretty obvious, but I'd like to go into the reasons why. As far as release is concerned, on February 12th, 3 o'clock Pacific time, 6 o'clock Eastern time, and 12:01 a.m., so technically February 13th in Europe, BWL will launch. Now you can already get a tune for it. It's very easy to do. You kill Scarshield Quartermaster outside of Ubers. You kill him, he drops a note. You click on the quest, accept it, and clear Ubers, kill the last boss, and click on the orb, you're attuned. You can do that now. I recommend doing that. So it'll come out at that time. How fast do you guys think it'll be cleared? In reality, it's, in my opinion and many others, it's going to be clear within an hour. So you may think to yourself, Melderon, why should I even care about its difficulty if it's going to be cleared that quickly? And a quick response to that is that the guilds that are going to be clearing it that quickly have done this many, many times on private servers and are preparing even now on PTRs. However, the entire Classic WoW community includes a very large group of guilds, players with different skills and real-life obligations. So that top 1%, top 5%, will clear the raid really quickly, may wipe once or twice, but will clear it the first night. And that doesn't mean that the rest of the player base shouldn't be prepared for what to expect in that raid. MC is very easy. I'm sure most of your guilds have cleared it by now, and probably wipe 0 times. I mean, it's a very easy raid. The mechanics are very simple. Threat is an issue, but it's not nearly an issue of what you're going to be experiencing in BWL. In my guild, I'm a member of Invictus, which is a world-class guild, but my raid is more casual, so I lead one of the 5 guilds that are in Invictus. What a lot of people were interested in, what I think was a good idea, was to jump into BWL on a PTR based on the Light's Hope Nost core. And my guild is comprised of many different players from many different walks of life. We have very high-end players who go hard, get world buffs, get their consumables. We have groups of players who don't do that, still are good players. And then we have players who have very little experience in raiding, so they're still learning. So I have a very mishmash group of people, and that works great for us, and we all enjoy that. And I think we learn a lot from each other, even though we come from different walks of life and have different skills and perceptions of what this should be. We've opened up that to my guild. About 20 of us, or about half the raid, is able to do it. So we go in there and we just open up the bosses with God mode on so they can see the mechanics, and we explain the fights as they go on. And a couple things that really shout out and really show through very clearly is that there's a couple different things that are very, very different compared to MC. Now, caveat here is that the Light's Hope core, the Nostalrius core, is much harder than what we perceived will happen on Classic WoW. We knew that that's very true for MC. That may not be true for BWL, but we are expecting it to be the same. However, despite that hard tuning, there's still some difficulties that will come up. And one of them is threat. Threat is an important issue. It is the Classic WoW mechanic. Mechanics in Classic WoW compared to retail Mythic, there's less of them. They may seem easy, but remember, all the mechanics you see in Mythic, a lot of them have their core basis in things that happened in the Classic era of World of Warcraft. So you have these basic mechanics that happen, but threat is the most important thing. As soon as you walk into BWL, you are met with 2 very hard bosses. That is not the case in MC at all. So you walk in, you have Razorgore, and you have Vale. And Razorgore is a test of not only threat, because your tanks have to be able to pick up threat on these incoming mobs immediately. Your DPS have to know to wait a second, or some of these mobs will come up the ramp and kill your raid. I'm not going to go into actual how the fights work and strategies. There are many videos and stuff like that online, but I just want to go into the general overview. So threat's an issue there, of course, and so is placement. And I think those are the 2 things that BWL really screams, is placement and threat. Those are the 2 main things we have to worry about. In MC, those things are not really important. They are to some extent in some fights, Ragnaros, but outside of that, most fights you just clump up and you just take the boss down. So with Razorgore, you're going to have to go in there. Someone's going to have to know how to kite Razorgore and kill the eggs, and you're going to have to kill these mobs in packs of either 2 or 4 groups. And once you do that, the boss itself is not that hard. However, the Off tanks have to make sure they have enough threat so that when Razor Gore drops threat on the main tank, who's the last person who actually uses the orb, they have to pick it up immediately or it'll go into the range and kill people. So there's a lot more there. But Veil's very different in a way that threat is the most important thing. Sure, there's a debuff that if you get it, you'll blow up the raid. That's important too. If a ranged player or if a melee pulls threat off the bosses or pulls threat off the tank, or if the tanks don't produce enough threat, you will get a wipe within 1 to 2 seconds because of an AoE, because of a chain cleave, and because of breaths. It's very, very important. And, you know, if you pull threat on Ani, you can just move into the tank position, you can survive some of that thing. You can kill Ani with like 10 people, right? That's not going to happen with the Razor Gore. The level of attention to detail is much higher in BWL. Whether it's a hard raid or not in comparison to retail, it is a much harder raid compared to MC. Trash is another thing. Trash is a lot harder. The lab packs after Broodlord Lashslayer, there are goblins that need to be kited by a mage or a hunter, or else they'll just throw grenades and wipe the raid. Warlocks have to be downed pretty quick. They have AoE Shadow Bolt abilities. They can summon in Felguards, which can do a lot of damage. And if those Felguards come out, they have to be immediately banished by Warlocks. Now, will these hard things be an issue progressing over and over again, week after week? No. Once your raid gets more gear, of course things will get more easier, it can be a little more lax. But initially, it's a very real thing that many guilds may fall apart because of the first 2 bosses in the trash alone. So I think the most important thing going into BWL is to know that ahead of time and to not get frustrated. If you have a good leadership core, they should be telling you what to do. And if you perform those actions, things will go smoothly. I think everyone's lulled into a state of complacency with MC, and it's very important to get out of that state of complacency to succeed in BWL. Another thing you have to worry about for tanks is taunt. Taunt is resistant. It means that miss is not an issue here. Your taunts will be resisted by most bosses. And in the Veil fight, that's the main reason why it's such a hard thing, right? It's like Ani on steroids. If someone pulls, they have to get to the tank position immediately, or the raid will wipe. Most of the bosses in BWL are taunt resistant, meaning that your tanks have to watch their threat meters and see who will get threat next if a tank either dies or a mechanic pushes that threat off. DPSers and healers, in response, need to have threat meters. I can't stress that enough. Guys, if you want to succeed in BWL, you have to be mindful of your threat. Basically, in summary, for the average guild, things are not going to be as easy as MC, and you need to get prepared. And the ways you can do that are many. You can watch videos or read guides. You can get items that will help you, of course. One of them being the Onyxia Scale Cloak, which will protect the wearer from some of the shadow damage that gets put out by some of the bosses. And for Nefarian, all the raid members need to have this. That takes a lot of coordination and pre-planning. There's almost no raids I can think of past TBC, to be honest, that raiders require to have certain items to go into the raid for a certain mechanic. Usually mechanics are backloaded, right? You have to know the mechanic, learn the mechanic, and then kill the boss. Whereas in this scenario, there's an item that exists that you're required to use for the mechanic. Another example of that are the hourglasses that drop off certain trash mobs that you're going to need for Chromagus. So there's items that are going to help you as well. And with those items come consumables. Guys, consumables are a joke in MC. World buffs are a joke in MC. And I'm not really a fan of world buffs. However, if you're having issues with BWL, that's something you might want to consider. You're going to need limited invulnerability potions if you're a DPS that pulls threat. You're going to need free action potions for tanks. You're going to need potions of any kind, mana, health, shadow protection potions, greater fire protection potions. These are things you're going to have, especially in the first couple weeks. If you're a guild, well, even for the top guilds, of course, they're going to be using them as well. But if you're a mediocre guild or an average guild, I hate to use those words, but a casual guild, you're going to need these things definitely. And then flasks. Egregious on Cargos' recent stream about BWL preparation had said something that's very, very important. DPSers, melee, will think to themselves, well, there's no flask that really increases my DPS, and that's not true. Flask of the Titans will increase your DPS by keeping you alive. A dead DPS equals 0 DPS, correct? So flasking is something you may want to consider as well. They are expensive, but progression, once you guys get the fights down, fine. But for the first couple weeks, you may want to consider spending some gold on something like flasks. all in all, for many of you, this may seem like a joke. A lot of you guys are very well versed in this game, and a lot of you have practiced on private servers for many years. I didn't do BWL in launch during live. I did it during private servers. Maybe I'm a little bit more prepared, maybe I'm not. But even if you are prepared, you don't know if your whole guild is. And you have to really step up and show leadership. You know, we had a healing shaman last night in our raid, on our practice BWL on the PTR, that was saying, you know, I have some insights on the tanking. I've tanked this before on PTRs. And you need to listen to people that have experience. And we let him, you know, have the floor, of course, and it really helped. You know, look inside your raid. BWL is about your raid being a cohesive unit, about knowing how to move, when to drop threat, when to watch threat tables. This is the first time in Classic WoW where your raid has to think on its feet and think as a unit. This is the real test of BWL. It's not the difficulty, it's not the armor values, it's not the hit points, it's can your raid come together and succeed. Another thing that I think a lot of you have to consider as well, especially if you're really into parses, a lot of these fights are going to make your parses look like dog shit. You have to be able to understand that and be ready for that. You may die very quickly in Veil due to the debuff and your parse is going to be shit. You may have to kite and add. You may have to sit there and spam silence or earth shock or whatever to silence targets. Your parses are always secondary during progression. When you have it on farm, that's a different story. You can boost your parses then, but parses should not be your main concern in the beginning of progression in a raid, in any raid. Guys, that's all I really have to say. Just wanted to go over some of my thoughts, some of my predictions. It will be cleared within an hour. I'm not surprised. I will not be surprised if it's cleared within 45 minutes. But for most guilds out there, it will take a lot longer, because most players did not do PTRs and did not play on private servers and do not have the experience, and that's totally fine. And if they do have experience, it was 15 years ago. Use it as a learning experience, enjoy the content. We still have a lot more to go in Classic WoW. There's a lot more to enjoy, and now is the time to prepare. Get your consumes, look at the strategies, be prepared when you walk into that raid, and things will be a lot easier. And for pugs, it's not going to be something that's puggable right away. It's going to take a while. So if you're not in a guild, you may want to consider getting into one, or be comfortable with the fact that it's going to take a while for this to be puggable. Guys, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed making this video. There'll be more coming soon. I have a really important video I want to talk about this weekend that talks about a new topic that should be coming up in the Classic WoW timeline. And I think a lot of you will enjoy that. Keep on keybinding and grinding. And as always, enjoy yourselves in Classic Azeroth. Take it easy.